welcome again. Thank you for sharing this time with us. Thank you for being here. I want to take just a brief moment to kind of talk a little bit more about this advisory council. The advisory council consists of 10 subcommittees, and these subcommittees helped inform the work at the county level, and we are excited to keep growing. My hope is that soon we'll have a subcommittee that represents young adults, and so if you are interested, please come and talk to me, come and talk to our chair who is here, Susan Muncie. Having a voice represented in our council is very important, as many of the efforts and prevention efforts and intervention efforts relate to young people. So having youth in our council is, I feel, is our priority. Dr. Tichin is here, and she can tell you a little bit about, very briefly, about our research and data subcommittee. We co-chair that subcommittee, and she can briefly tell you a little bit more about it.
Sure. Hi. So I'm Kanani Koshana. I'm sitting over a clue, so I'm not going to get too close to any of you. I co-chair this committee with Harley. So do they know what the committee is at all? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we're a subcommittee of the Advisory Council for the County of San Diego. This is a pretty unique council in general, in that it's a bunch of subcommittees with all different points of view and sort of stakeholders in the community who come together to combat human trafficking. So we are with research and data. Research and data is basically looking at sometimes the prevalence of human trafficking, but more often, what are the factors that go into trafficking? What are risk factors? What are the outcomes? What are the rates of, for lack of a better term, recidivism for human trafficking? Who's being trafficked? How are they being trafficked? How are they being recruited? Who's doing the recruiting? Where is the recruiting happening? I think probably the best example of Research and Data Committee is the 2016 study by Dr. Jamie Gates, who I don't know if he's here, and Dr. Amy Carpenter, looking at human trafficking and gang involvement in San Diego. That was a hallmark study that was done, and it found human sex trafficking to be an $800 billion industry here in San Diego alone, and that was 8 years ago. We would all love to do that kind of study, and do that kind of study every year, but that required an immense effort on the part of several different entities. In terms of the research that I do, I've done research with trafficked youth, qualitative research, as I know Dr. Carly has as well. Hearing from youth who have been trafficked and hearing what they have to say, in particular for my field, what they have to say about the healthcare industry and their encounters with healthcare, how they found that to be, how many kids are getting into healthcare while they're actively being trafficked, how are they being treated, why aren't they coming forward, what are the factors that impede their being able to disclose that they're being exploited. And then a large part of what I do is working with survivors to collect data like that. I'm also working with physicians, nurses, practitioners, social workers, anybody who works in the healthcare industry to educate healthcare professionals about human trafficking, what are the common red flags or signs of human trafficking, specifically for me in youth, because I work in a children's hospital. And also keeping in mind that trafficking doesn't only mean sex trafficking, that labor trafficking actually comprises a larger part of the problem of human trafficking here in this country and abroad. I think that's it.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I don't know if I introduced my myself, but for those who you don't know me, my name is Carly Richie-Zabaleta. I'm part of the Advisory Council for the Research and Data Subcommittee, but I also work at the Center for Justice and Reconciliation. My role is a Senior Research Associate, and we are always looking for interns who would like to join in and volunteer at the center, looking at how we use research to do advocacy or to inform policy or look at other different factors within the context of human trafficking. So if you are interested, please let me know. Our presenters are going to take us from policy. They're going to show us how policy interconnects with anti-human trafficking efforts, and then they're going to also take us to and show us some of the behavioral issues that maybe put someone at risk at different stages of life, from youth to college. And then we're going to finalize with a student-led initiative from UCSD. So please help me welcome our presenters. And our first presenter is Hannah Ross. Please welcome Hannah Ross.
Hello, my name is Hannah Ross. I'm a criminal justice major at Point Loma Nazarene, and I just want to start by thanking Dr. Richie-Zabaleta, my research professor, for giving me the opportunity to speak here at HT Radar. It's such an honor, truly, and I also want to thank her for inspiring me to combine my passion of counter-human trafficking work into my comparative policy analysis for my research project. And unfortunately, I did not have the opportunity to finish my research and carry this out, but I will today be discussing the findings from my literature review. And my research question is, how do the California and Florida justice system models differ in preventing re-victimization of victims who have survived human trafficking? My independent variable is the California and Florida justice system models manifesting as the policies and task forces, whereas my independent variable is the victims who have survived human trafficking and preventing their re-victimization. To address my background, the reality for most human trafficking victims is that they are criminalized for committing acts they are forced to commit to avoid more physical, verbal, or emotional abuse from their traffickers. These crimes include drug-related charges, prostitution, and theft, according to Reed and Fox, 2023. And in the year 2000, human trafficking was federally recognized as a national issue through the Trafficked Victims Protection Act, and it was defined as the exploitation of a person through coercion for material gain. Despite the implementation of this act, human trafficking cases continue to rise. And therefore, I was curious to explore on a more local level how cities and states combat human trafficking. I chose to assess 3 of California's many anti-human trafficking legislations listed above, and the Florida Safe Harbor laws. I also chose to assess the San Diego Human Trafficking Task Force and the Miami-Dade Human Trafficking Task Force. And I just want to go back to this image or this map provided as a resource by the Polaris Project. And in 2019, it was a human trafficking hotline report of human trafficking locations across the United States. And I chose this because I felt it helped to explain the reasoning for me choosing California and Florida. First of all, I chose it for their geographical location on either coast of the United States. They both have economies rooted in agriculture and tourism, and they have large immigration presence along with clearly high concentrations of human trafficking. And then within my literature review, I found that The presence of a specialized human trafficking task force alone, according to Farrell et al., results in higher success rate of identified victims. It results in decreased re-victimization and the possibility to file federal charges. According to Spoon in 2014, well-curated policies that are victim-oriented and allocate finances to support a properly trained and equipped human trafficking task force are critical for the support of human trafficking victims. Unfortunately, the gap in the literature illuminates the lack of truly preventative and restorative policies that are victim-oriented, along with the allocation and degree to which training occurs within task forces and the clear documentation of human trafficking cases. Although the findings would suggest that through victim-oriented policies, the implementation of proper resources such as funding, training, and aftercare resources for victims of human trafficking could help eliminate re-victimization and protect at-risk populations from falling into this horrific cycle of abuse. And I chose to conduct my comparative policy analysis through the use of 2 rubrics assessing the policies and also the task forces. They were inspired by these Shared Hope International report cards. These were taken in 2011, and as you see, Florida was ranked at a B, whereas California was ranked at a C. These are comprised through the state's criminal provisions, victim identification and response, aftercare, justice for survivors, tools for victim-centered criminal justice response, and prevention and training. In my report cards, or in my rubrics, I also want to clarify that this is the task force. The one on the left is the task force, and the one on the right is for the policies. I got the labels mixed up, but I chose to assess on the presence of specialized task forces, the frequency at which the task forces meet, and the level of their documentation of cases, whereas the policies were assessed on the access for victims to emergency housing, health care, and justice resources. Unfortunately, I was not able to assess California and Florida based on my rubrics, but I really look forward to potentially one day carrying this out. I really appreciate your time and attention. Thank you so much. This concludes my presentation. I would love to introduce my peer, Abby Pyle. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Abby. I'm a student at Point Loma Nazarene. And I'd like to take a quick aside to apologize for my voice. I'm getting over a little bit of a cold, but I'm going to do my best to be present with y'all today and present this information well. As a future social work practitioner, I am really, really passionate about preventing human trafficking. As we know, the only way to truly stop an issue of this size is to prevent it before it starts. And so prevention is a difficult thing to measure. It's hard to figure out how much something isn't happening because it's not happening. So it requires some creativity, and it's a challenge, and I wanted to share with you one way that I began engaging with that data. So I took data from the National Human Trafficking Hotline. As you can see, the state of California is marked in yellow, and the United States is marked in blue. We have cases identified and victims identified here. As we can see, the trend lines tend to match. Not exactly for how small the data sets are. They're pretty close. I'd also like to direct your attention over here to hotel and motel sex trafficking cases identified in the United States and in California. There's some legislation passed in California, marked there by the dot on the side. You can see that, I know it's very small. And that requires some training efforts in the hotel and motel industry. People are required to train employees who are on the front lines. It's not necessarily prevention, but it is awareness. And when that awareness spreads, we see those numbers rise. So these are reporting numbers. And that's what we want to see initially. We want more awareness, we want more reporting, and that data looks good. But it doesn't look like that when you look at minors in the education system, which is what I really wanted to highlight today. So as you can see, there's a very specific downward trend line. This is legislation passed right at the end of 2017 for the education system, and those numbers are going down. While we can note that the COVID-19 pandemic really threw research for a loop, it raised rates of human trafficking and lowered rates of reporting. And although correlation is not necessarily causation, I hypothesize that this could be because we're actually doing effective prevention. Not only is our awareness rising and we're able to report more, but it's actually happening less because we're stopping it before it starts. Let's take a look at that policy. The Human Trafficking Prevention, Education, and Training Act of 2017 was landmark legislation. As Sam had talked about, it requires prevention. Students and teachers are both being aware of the processes. It requires student involvement, a multidisciplinary approach, and assessment tools and quality control. There's a paper by Degree and Salas that does a great job of talking about this. It needs to be all-encompassing. And it requires all states, or all students and teachers in California, for middle schools and high schools, to take part in these prevention efforts. I believe the reason why this has been so effective when it is actually employed is because it treats human trafficking like it's a public health issue. Something of this magnitude and of this size, and due to the nature of this crime, requires clear goals and health outcomes. It needs to be research-based and theory-driven. All of these things are cited by places like the Protect curriculum or the No More curriculum that really encompass what it means to make an effective public health curriculum. The CDC goes on to name other points where this is important. Things like addressing individual values, attitudes, and beliefs. It needs to address individual and group norms. It needs to reinforce its protective factors, increase perceptions and personal risks. It needs to address social pressures and influences, build schools, build skills, personal and social competencies, and self-efficacy. It needs to provide functional health knowledge, use strategies to personalize the information. It also needs to be age and developmentally appropriate because there's a wide range of students being taught 12 to 18. Also needs to be culturally inclusive for the diverse student populations present in California. It needs to provide adequate time to instruct and reinforce for learning and provide adequate opportunities to make positive connections and make sure that teachers and professionals are actually prepared to meet the needs of responding to reports of human trafficking. In conclusion, it can't be a one-and-done thing. It has to continue. The school has to be well supported, and that's what it takes to create a really good prevention program. So moving forward, we need to acknowledge that not every school is doing this. In California, it's a requirement, but we need funding. We need support and we need further research. If we want to truly treat human trafficking like it is a public health issue, we need to respond to it well. We need accountability and support. We need to advocate to our school systems to make sure they have appropriate funding and that teachers and administrators are well prepared for these programs. We need to expand this prevention legislation to other places, continue to treat it like a public health issue, and of course, more and more research helps us actually prevent this and stop it before it starts. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm really excited to introduce my colleague, Robert.
Good afternoon. My name is Bella Rajoni, and I will be presenting on sexting and behavioral implications. As you may have noted from my title slide, I am currently an undergrad student at Point Loma Nazarene University, studying child and adolescent development. For the purposes of today's presentation, well, first of all, let me say, I am standing here today because of a research basics course I took last fall semester, in which we were required to research a topic of our interest and create a research proposal. So for the purposes of my presentation today, I'll be focusing on my literature review, which highlights 3 developmental trends that also act as risk factors which could potentially increase the susceptibility of adolescents to engaging in sexting. Now, in the grand scheme of things, the goal would be to continue to explore this topic and close the gaps between adolescent sexting, and potential sexual exploitation that could occur further down the line. So a quick introduction. Sexting is defined as the exchange of and or forwarding of self-made images that display nude or semi-nude photos of individuals via online platforms. Kettle et al. In 2014 stated that 24.8% of adolescents sent sex, while 31.5% of adolescents received sex. So overall, it is a popular trend among our youth, and the numbers continue to rise as the years go on. But again, the real question we have to ask ourselves is, why are adolescents more susceptible to engaging in sexting? So the first developmental trend that also serves as a risk factor for this is the influence of peers. Adolescence is a time where they are actively searching for a deep sense of belonging amongst one another. Therefore, they are extremely motivated to be accepted by others. Byrne et al. In 2021 coins the term social capital. Social capital is essentially the platform by which adolescents seek to be accepted by. So for instance, if adolescents are able to gain the sense of social capital, it's also their same key for being able to gain a sense of social success, which again correlates to their direct need for this sense of belonging. Now with that in mind, media has increasingly been portrayed as sexy. TV shows, movies, social media as we know it today has been indirectly portraying the image that being sexually active or sexually outgoing is valuable and acceptable. So when adolescents take this and accept this notion that is already put out in media, it leads usually to peer conformity, where if one adolescent is doing it, more likely their peers and friends are also doing that same thing because it has already been accepted behavior. Lastly, and unfortunately, there is the aspect of peer pressure, where if one is doing it, they may force another to join them, or force them to do so because they're like, hey, we believe this is accepted, therefore you should do it too. So this is the first part that could lead adolescents to engage in sexting. The second is cognition. Piaget is a famous child developer, and he created the formal operational thinking stage. Essentially, this means that adolescents have unstable and developing schemas. Schemas are essentially categories that our brains create to make sense of information that we are receiving from our external world. So for adolescents, there's so many new feelings and new experiences that they are going through. During this process, their brains are still in the organizational stage of trying to sort through all of that. With that in mind, we also have dopamine. Dopamine is a reward-seeking hormone within our brains and our bodies. For adolescents, it is basically in the driver's seat, and it is in control of these adolescents' growing and developing brains. Adolescents are more prone to pleasure-seeking and reward-seeking or risk-taking behaviors, which is why sexting has become a huge deal within these specific populations. So we've established the fact that media influences adolescents influence one another, and their cognition and developing brains are within that same mix. Lastly, is their emerging sexual identities. This is also super new for them, and because they do not have any prior knowledge of it, they are more susceptible to making decisions without thinking as much as they should. So for instance, we've all been through puberty. It's a natural biological experience that we all undergo. For adolescents, they are right in the thick of it, and they are trying to work through this and figure themselves out. With that, there's Bander's social cognitive theory as well as the 3AM model, which essentially proposes that adolescents observe and imitate the behavior that they see. Keeping that in mind, there's also expectations that come with this behavior from, again, the media sources, their peer sources, and those kind of all combine to culminate into their attempt to make their own sexual identity. So essentially, they are creating their own media diets, and adolescents are attempting who they want to be or believe they should be based on these media influences as well as their susceptibility to their peers. And once again, they're developing schemas that they're still working on, and again, I emphasize that their brains are under construction. Nonetheless, it is important to keep in mind that they are still extremely intellectually sound, and they are still growing and developing, and that does not mean that we need to look down at them at all. Instead, it means that we need to recognize their vulnerability, but also create an open and listening community where we can engage with them at their level. If we can meet them where they're at, we could stop or prevent further cases of sexual exploitation from occurring. So overall, the main goal would be to continue to explore this topic. I only focus on the sexting aspect, but I would love to further close that gap to see how that correlates to sexual exploitation, which many adolescents have undergone in some way or another. So the next time you work with adolescents or engage with them in some way, I encourage you to take a moment to pause and really listen to what they have to say so that you can better support them and protect them in the future. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My notes on my iPad here. I wanted to introduce myself first. My name is Ashley. I'm a second-year doctoral student with a UCSD SDSU joint doctoral program on interdisciplinary research in substance use. So thank you for allowing me to present today. My presentation is on sexual exploitation and overdose among college students attending school in San Diego County and Imperial Valley. It comes out of a larger study of Dr. Leanne Muratis, which sought to explore the nature and extent of human trafficking and sexual exploitation among college students in these areas and what can be done to understand it. So a little bit of background on why we chose this topic. College students are experiencing a period of social transition and newly gained independence, and many are away from their established support system and in a new environment. These factors can make them vulnerable to sexual exploitation. Research has shown an increased risk of substance use among survivors, which may arise from a multitude of factors, for example, coping with trauma. Within this context, we also know that drug overdose deaths among young adults aged 18 to 25 are rapidly increasing in the United States. The burden of overdose is felt in younger populations. In fact, deaths from overdose among this age group were the leading cause of injury and deaths in 2021, our latest data. However, despite the increase in overdose among young people at college age, there is a lack of literature surrounding college overdose and the specific vulnerabilities that may place them at increased risk. Therefore, in our study, we wanted to understand whether there was an association between experiencing sexual exploitation and having an overdose among college students. So, as I said, this research was a part of a larger study studying exploring sexual exploitation on campuses. The survey that we sent out was self-administered via Qualtrics online platform. Participants received a $15 gift card via a separate survey that was not linked to their responses in order to maintain that anonymity. A community advisory board was also set up, which consisted of human trafficking survivors and members of the community and campuses who vetted the survey. We recruited students and alumni in San Diego County and Imperial Valley who had personal experience and or knew someone who had been trafficked, sexually exploited, or sold sex. The measures included substance use validated scales, such as audit, and we had representation from over 12 campuses. So we provided a comprehensive list of community and campus-specific resources and the option to be contacted. For our characteristics of our sample, we had over 800 students respond to the survey, with a mean age of 20. The majority, 67.6%, were women. Here we can see that 27% of students were Latinx, 26% white, 18 multiracial, 14 Black or African American, 13 Asian Pacific Islander, and 3% American Indian Native Alaskan. The majority of the sample, 84%, were undergraduates, with about a quarter in their first year of college. Around 20% of the students reported experiencing sexual exploitation specifically. Many reported that this experience had an impact on their drug and alcohol consumption. For example, 36% reported an increase in their consumption, and 9.3% said they actually started using because of this experience. For alcohol, 42.6% reported an increase due to the experience, and 10% said that they began using it. This paints a powerful picture of their experience and the relationship between substance use and sexual exploitation for these students. Then we looked at overdose and found that 37% of survivors reported experience an overdose in college, largely involving the use of stimulants and multiple drugs. This is in line with current research in middle-aged populations, which shows that overdoses are now being driven by stimulant use, either contamination with opioids or co-use of other drugs. You can see that very few reported knowingly taking opioids that day. We used multiple regression analyses to test the association of our aim, which was sexual exploitation and overdose, and found that these student survivors were 3.7 times more likely to report having an overdose than their peers. Our findings support the need for tailored overdose prevention in college that addresses and takes into account vulnerabilities such as sexual exploitation. So that's going to be all for me. I'm excited to discuss this further in the roundtable later on, and if you have any questions, you can contact me, or you can take a screenshot of that QR code. And I would like to introduce the next presenters, Sarah and Shannon from UCSD.
Hi everyone, I'm Shannon. I founded Trafficking Against Human Trafficking.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and I'm the current president of TAHT. We do have Shivani, who is our vice president, and unfortunately she couldn't be with us here today, but let me just finish introducing ourselves first before we get on to her video. I am a UCSD alumni. I graduated in 2021. And I'll go a bit into how I founded the organization, but right now I am a pre-health student. I am an EMT and I currently work in the emergency department, so I kind of stay involved as much as I can. Sarah? Hi everyone, so I'm a fourth year finishing my biology degree at UCSD, and I also work as a medical scribe for cardiologists, and I am very passionate about this. I'd like to say thank you to the amazing Dr. Titchin for getting us involved, and also for Dr. Carly for giving us this opportunity. All right.
Hi everyone, my name is Shivani and I am a UCSD student and have been involved with Trans Against Human Trafficking for 3 years. Unfortunately, I cannot make it there today due to an exam conflict, but I'm there in spirit. What initially motivated me to join Trans Against Human Trafficking was that I was shocked at the lack of campus initiatives against human trafficking, especially considering that San Diego is the 13th worst city in the US for trafficking. Since I joined the club, I have learned so much about the signs, prevention techniques, and different forms of trafficking, and in the future hope to continue to educate myself and others about the prevalent issue so we can help to combat it. Thank you so much.
Kind of like going along with what Shivani said, I think the three of us came together when we did some of our own research and we learned certain things about trafficking that really astounded us. So for her, it was the fact that San Diego was such a large city and trafficking was so prevalent in our city. For me, I was really shocked by the increase in use of social media as like a recruitment effort, especially with my own personal experiences with using the internet growing up. With Sarah, she learned that a lot of these survivors and a lot of victims who are still in trafficking, they oftentimes have a lot of encounters with healthcare, and we learned that healthcare is one of those places where we can intervene and potentially give them a way out. And it was one of those things where like once we realized all those facts, we couldn't really look back. It was shocking. And then I kind of saw it as like, well, if all these survivors and victims are going through trafficking and they're actually meeting these healthcare providers, well, UCSD is this huge hub of students who are, a lot of them are pre-health. And, before all of this, we didn't know anything about trafficking. If we didn't know, they certainly didn't know. And we thought it was really important to bring this to the forefront of students' minds and have them all be aware. They are our future clinicians, and so we just thought it was important to kind of start doing that.
Yeah, so basically our purpose for our organization is to educate, just like advocacy work. Because like Shannon said, we're actually the first, she founded the first anti-human trafficking club at UCSD, which is fascinating because you would think that UC San Diego would have something like this already.
but it doesn't. So she spearheaded that, and it's amazing. And really, we want to just promote awareness of this issue because it happens in college campuses, like our previous presenters showed, and it happens more than we know. And it could be happening at the parties we go to, even in classes. You really never know. And basically, we collaborate with nonprofit organizations that Shannon's going to discuss in a little bit, and any representatives that are working in the field. And we also really just want to enhance our understanding of the global issue of human trafficking, because we try to solve this at the local level, but it really is a global thing. And we believe firmly that if we can even change one little thing on our local scale here in San Diego, then this is going to affect the global market pool. So every voice matters and every effort matters.
Right, so obviously we didn't know anything about it, right? We were working ground zero. There was just a couple of us that was like, okay, let's start an organization. So how are we supposed to educate other students if we weren't educated on the topic ourselves, right? So we just did various things. We got ourselves certified. We took little online certifications courses like the Blair's Project on how to identify human trafficking. Dr. Titchen introduced us to the LIFT program with the American Medical Women's Association, where you can also get certified in how to identify victims of trafficking from a clinician's point of view. We watched a lot of documentaries, podcasts, and then in the early stages of this organization too, obviously we didn't know anything, so we did a lot of cold emails and we reached out to a lot of nonprofit organizations like Generate Hope, Alabaster Jar Project, E3. And a lot of times when I reached out to these organizations, they would say, hey, no problem. We would love to come and just talk to you guys about trafficking and teach you a little bit. And so we kind of got mini lessons from there. From there, once we kind of established a baseline of, okay, I think we know enough to kind of start talking to other students and start forming discussions, we would reach out to other student organizations and say, hey, let's do a joint GBM. Where we kind of just met up together. We did 2 clubs in one day, They would do their stuff, and then we'd say, okay, well, let's do a presentation. And then we would just present our findings and talk to them that, and just help them be aware, like, hey, this is an ongoing issue in San Diego, and this is something that you can actually be aware of, and you can take action against it, you can be involved. Here are different ways that you can identify patients, et cetera, et cetera. And that was just the first stepping stone.
One specific thing that we did that was particularly very eye-opening for Shannon and I was through the Pepperdine Caruso School of Law Anti-Human Trafficking Legislation Lab. We worked as medical research assistants to 2 professors, 2 amazing professors, and we helped law students come up with a policy brief that would recommend or really just enforce some sort of training for healthcare providers to be able to recognize and treat human trafficking victims. And we audited the class in its entirety. It was definitely very eye-opening for us, and like Shannon keeps emphasizing, we are learners. As much as we love to do these things, we also have a lot to learn. So doing this and looking at the statistics from a different point of view, from the legal side, from the medical side, it really just ties everything in together. It makes you really understand how big the scope of this whole issue is. And so I'm happy to share that hopefully it has reached the senator's desk, and maybe it will be passed in this cycle or next cycle if it gets chosen for the human trafficking segment. But yeah, we're very excited to share that. Policy making takes a long time. It's a long and strenuous process. So it's been 3 years, but hopefully this year or next year it will be out.
So plans for the future. Like I said, I started this organization on ground zero with kind of not knowing what was going to come out of it. So far we've just been presenting our information with other organizations and stuff like that. But we're hoping to grow the organization a little bit more and take steps in the direction of research. So one of the things we kind of want to do is start recording student responses before and after our presentations, and to kind of start doing more quantitative research in that way to see if our educational presentations are effective and whether or not this kind of information stays with them, or how they found the, what their impressions were. Another thing we want to do is start hosting discussion days, because with something as sensitive and as complicated as trafficking or sex work or anything along that field, it's hard to find a safe space to talk about it and work towards progress when there's nowhere to talk about it. So we want to start hosting these discussion days where we welcome all students of any background and major to just have a free and open discussion. We can talk about how complicated it is. We can talk about what's wrong with it, what we could do to kind of progress forward. Other than that, we plan on just continuing awareness along the campus and hopefully pass the baton on to the next generation of students.
Definitely, like Shannon said, for us, we are 3 members, but it's really more about quality rather than quantity. We want people who are just as passionate as us, if not more, about this. And it's incredibly difficult to recruit members for such a sensitive and heavy topic, because people want to go to student orgs mainly to have fun and socialize, and we do that here too, but it's really not to discuss something so heavy. So if you know of anyone who's at UC San Diego or starting, because I'm graduating this year, Shivani's graduating, Shannon's already done, so we would love to pass this on. We don't want TAHD to die after we're done. So if you guys know of anyone, please reach out to us. Our emails are going to be on the next slide.
So yeah, those are just some videos and stuff that we use to educate ourselves if you guys are interested. And that's it.